David Oxton is 38 and has been racing at this circuit for 20 years. He's last year's Grand Prix winner and the lap record holder here. Second fastest qualifier for today. He's in a Rolls RT4 wearing number 18. As usual, the car meticulously prepared, and David, despite missing the Bay Park round, right on the pace at his home track.
Dad built one of the first go-karts in the country. I used to run it around the fruit trees. He had a popular mechanics, and it wasn't until my mid-teens that I went to watch Steve running a Dame the Dart up the hill climbs. Eventually I said, can I have a go? And so I did, and then we shared the car, and we borrowed a bloke's 105e Anglia, and we did the 6-hour race of Pukekohe, 1963 or 4. And so that's how it started. We then got into a sports car called a Lola Mark I. So the Lola came, and we did pretty good with that. I did a bit of training of the circuits by going to the South Island. Steve went off to Ken Sager, who was getting out of racing, and said we could be interested, and that's when we got into his Brabham. And those Brabhams were part of what that period was called the National Formula. So it had a Lotus twin cam engine in the back. And the drivers were Graham Lawrence, Ken Smith, Rolly Levis, Lawrence Brownlee, Graham McRae. Magic field, magic racing. And we did that between 67 and 69. That was when what we knew it as the Tasman series started to come to an end. That's when we had the Formula One drivers coming out, and it was a wonderful period with their flash cars. But when that came to an end, that's when the 5000 era came along. We couldn't do that, but I worked as a mechanic for a good friend in America called Joe Cavalieri on a 5000 car in the first season, Mike Goff. And that got me a ride in a Lotus in America, and because that went pretty well, I brought it home to New Zealand, ran it the Tasman series in 71. And then out of that, George Begg offered me a ride the next year. So we had 3 wonderful years with George, with the 5000s that he built, and won the Gold Star 3 times. And then a trip to Europe with George. We ran on some magic tracks and took a bit of Kiwi to Europe, which was great for both of us. Then back to New Zealand, I took over the car, ran it 73, 74. Then hung up the gloves for a while Robbie Lester started the wonderful category Formula Pacific, which is really what we call Formula Atlantic overseas. And that was this chassis, or this size, this configuration of car, with the BDA 1600 Ford, the Ford engine, Cosworth engine. We ran combined grids at the start, which was really strange. We ran this little cars against the big 5000s on a staggered grid, but that was the phase out of the big cars and the phase in of these cars. And so we again had another one of those golden periods of racing. Dave McMillan, Steve Millen, K.K. Rosberg, Roberto Moreno, wonderful names that came over.
Have a look at these two, Davy Jones, David Oxton. Oxton seeming to get so close and yet so far away. He's been working and working to get that close, but not quite close enough.
Yes, we've just heard that David Oxton is lapping at 1 minute 4.9, which is the fastest lap, one of the fastest laps we've ever heard of on this circuit.
Jack Bennett's, he used to say, if you're going to get into this car sponsorship stuff, be very clear with the size of the font on the car. Leave people in no doubt about who is backing you. So I think that's a testimony to his advice that 40 years on, people still refer to this as the pie car. The NEC was the sponsor that we had a year after I'd stopped racing the blue car. We rented a car from Australia, and my sponsor, Doug Condon, had moved to NEC. So I went with him, and NEC went on the car, again big and bold. A big part of the history of this car was my dad, Steve Oxton. He was responsible for landing it and bringing it into the country back in '81. Dad got it from the airport and dragged it into the workshop and started to hang wheels on it. He just couldn't wait to get into it. And it was a really good period of my life, racing with Dad and with Dick and my mates, the 3 Johns, the John Farnsworth and John Bowden and John Goodwin. And Alan Draper, who built the engines, a rally guy, another good friend. And so it was just a neat chapter of my life, and I kind of hung on to it because of that.